genuinely one of the best developers that you will ever meet. So if you have a development question, that's your guy. But also a business professional. So he runs a company called Cake down in Newport Beach. You now have, what, 30, 40 engineers working for you now? Doing a lot of very high-level, complex things. A lot of the coolest problems that are out there in software right now they're tackling. So one of the more interesting jobs and one of the more interesting environments. So he's going to tell you a little bit about what they do there, a little bit about what to expect in software development, and then we'll open the floor to Q&A. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Harrison. So yeah, actually, at Harrison, we started Cake about, I don't know, 8, 9 years ago now. Essentially, we are in the MarTech space, so marketing technology, similar to if you've heard of ad tech, but essentially ad tech is specifically for like display advertising, and we kind of cover all digital marketing. And what we do is we're a tracking platform that's really trying to expose to our clients what their return on ad spend is. So essentially, you're spending money here, what's performing, how much money are you making because of that, where should you spend more? We have an emphasis in affiliate marketing, which is kind of a niche, but ultimately we're really trying to be tracking all digital marketing. We've recently gotten into a much more in-depth problems case, which is essentially attribution, where when you're searching and looking for a product today online, you might see an ad on Facebook and then not click on it, right? And then essentially you start getting retargeted, and that ad seems to follow you around the internet. And then essentially you search for it on Google, you might click on it, and then finally convert, right? There's a lot of touch points in what we would call touch points in there, and what we call that customer journey. And trying to make sense of which of those things was really relevant and how important each of those touch points was into your ultimate customer journey, and ultimately why you actually got to a purchasing decision is very complex. It's hard to solve. That's a lot of data science tech work. That's one of the big things that we're trying to tackle right now. And yeah, essentially we have integrations with a lot of the big platforms. So we integrate with Facebook, Google, Bing. We essentially pull data from them, kind of augment our data that we collect ourselves with their data, so that we can tell people not only what we've tracked, but ultimately what other people have said about the same consumers. And we really believe that doing effectively what we're trying to accomplish really involves as much data as possible. So we're really big on data and really gathering as much as we can. We're currently tracking about 10 billion clicks a month, which is a decent number. In terms of, we're not an ad server. Ad servers are the companies that you hear about that they're doing the most volume, and the biggest ad servers would do about 100 billion impressions per month. But those are impressions, right? And what we call the click-through rate, meaning how many of those were actually clicked on, is going to be 10% or less of that number. And so what that means is, by tracking 10 billion clicks, we're actually up there with anyone doing in terms of volume. And that brings about a lot of very interesting problems for us. Being able to scale to the point of being able to handle that many requests per month is no small feat, and means that we have to build things in a very optimized way and have to worry about certain things that most people just don't have to worry about. Makes it fun. So yeah, we have, lastly I'll talk about just the kind of divisions in terms of within our engineering team, how that's kind of broken up and what people do. Essentially we break the world up into our kind of our back-end / data engineering developers. We have kind of front-end who are working on our portal itself. We have an application that's now being rewritten in React and with a .NET back-end on that. We have then our engineers that work on our tracking itself. And then finally we have our QA team and our DevOps team. And the DevOps team is the team, keep the lights on, and the QA team obviously testing everything. Yeah, I think that's everything about Cake I was going to start with. Questions?
How'd you get into software?
I got into software. I was volunteering at a nonprofit when I was in high school. Came across a problem where this was in the 90s. Came across a problem where they wanted to expose an internal database that they had, which was in the Access format, Microsoft Access, online, right? And I had not had any experience in development and figured, hey, this has got to be possible, and figured that out on my own, got very interested in it, ended up really loving the idea of development, went to school for it, here I am.
So what's the most important team that you have working for you
Huh.
right now?
Oh man, wouldn't want them to hear this. Most important team. The team, that's really hard. I'd say right now the team that's, I think that changes over time as your problems change. There's kind of very seasonal in terms of like, we build something brand new and then we have to support it and then we have to grow it and then we build something brand new again, right? And each one of those phases, the teams are, I have to spend more of my personal time dealing with different teams to make sure that whatever we're trying to do in that season is working well. Right now, it's actually our DevOps team. Our DevOps team, in terms of growing what we already have and handling that many requests monthly, is no small feat. So I'm spending a lot of my personal time within the DevOps team, making sure things are more automated, things are scripted, things are dynamically scaled, that we're not having to have someone doing this all day. And yeah, that's right this second I would say that. Yes.
What are the main things that you're looking in, like, job candidates?
I would say, it's always a great question. I would say, don't BS me. Tell me what you know, what you don't know. And because if you try to, I'm gonna know anyway, right? And I'm not gonna be very interested in you. And someone's very passionate, hungry, and really loves and does this job for the love of doing it and not necessarily for a paycheck, right? And that comes across very quickly in an interview in my experience, where it's like, no, I'm in this because I really like doing it, and I'm really interested in growing and learning more, right? Because you're gonna come in with not a ton of experience, and essentially, I'm hiring you on the basis of my believing in your growth and your potential. And I have to believe that, one, you want it, and two, that you're capable. You want it is more, I think, easier sometimes to figure out than are you capable, which is why sometimes we'll do some sort of proficiency test. But all sorts of side projects and things for someone without a ton of experience are really good to see. That also proves the passion side of it, depending on what you built and why.
Okay.
Yes.
This might have touched upon the last one a bit, but what are some of the biggest or most common mistakes you see in interviews?
Yeah. So go back to the don't BS me. I think if I ask a question and you talk around in a circle for an hour, and it's which unfortunately happens a lot, even with very senior candidates, it's immediately clear that you don't know the answer. And instead of just telling me, you know what, I don't know, which I would respect and be like, okay, that's fine, I've now lost all respect. That one is a very, very big pet peeve of mine. It's like, look, you basically are disrespecting me to the point where you think you're going to pull a fast one on me, right? And it's like, no, like I know the answer to this question. I know that you're not giving it to me. Just tell me that you don't know. Outside of that, I think it's hard. Confidence is a hard thing for a lot of people, and just kind of promoting yourself in general, regardless of the context, can be difficult. But essentially, looking for someone that's not afraid to talk about themselves to some extent, right? And really own who you are and not try to be something else, right? Because it's nice in this profession that culturally, a lot of the places, even around here, that you would go into, like, this isn't a situation where I'm going to expect you to come in a shirt and tie every day to work, right? And that kind of thinking kind of goes all the way to the point where we have Nerf battles every day, and people like to do things outside of work together, and culture is 50% of why I hire someone, that you're a good culture fit, that you would actually fit in with everyone else. And so if you try to be something that you're not in that situation, I'm not going to believe that you're a good culture fit.
What's it like working at a startup?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think since we have in our 3 offices, we have about a little over 100 people. And so it's interesting when you ask about startups, because I wouldn't even call us a startup anymore. That's even though we only have 100 people in comparison to bigger people, right? So I don't know where that line is, like how many years you have to be in business before you graduate from not being a startup in tech anymore. But essentially, Harrison was there and knows that we bootstrapped this thing, which is not, there's lots of ways to start a company, right? And we did it with very little money. Versus venture capital can come in and give you millions of dollars, and you can kind of jumpstart it from there. We didn't do it that way, and so it was a lot of work. Essentially, a lot of long nights. I pulled all-nighters regularly back then, and it's difficult. You gotta wear a lot of hats too. So you don't have someone that, oh, this person will do that. No, that's you. Like, I was doing sales, I was doing support, I was doing, I was on call 24/7 to deal with any issues that came up. You literally have to do everything. And so, you know, it's an interesting question when people ask, like, would you do that again? And I would say yes, differently, but not to the same extent, right? I think that there's, and thinking about it, like, your life changes over time. Like, would I do it again if I was still 20? Well, yes, right? Would I do it again at 30? Probably not, right? So it's really where you are in your life and whether you're willing, like, if you really want to start something of your own, are you willing to put in that work? And because it's going to be a lot of work. And it's very, you know, fulfilling. If and when you get past the point where you see some success in that and it grows, and being able to look back and see what you've done and is great. But at the same time, the work never really stops, right? There's always a new problem. And so if you want to be in that position, you got to understand that's always going to be a lot of work. It's never going to get easier. But I still love it.
Is there a program that you enjoy more than any other programs?
Like programming language?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say my core programming language personally right now is C#, but we are doing a lot of and JavaScript for that matter, but we're doing a lot of stuff in Golang now, which is for high performance stuff. Not a huge Java fan, but we do have stuff in Java as well. Python is kind of the de facto language for DevOps, and something that we use pretty heavily as such. But if I was going to just go build something real quick, back-end wise, it would be in C#.
What do you think has helped you like learn new languages? Like when things come up and what kind of resources do you turn to?
You know, I've always been a self-starter and rather like figure certain things out for myself. So I'm not someone that would go through, like I'd probably start some sort of online course and then never finish it and then kind of just figure it out. Like just get the basics from something and then kind of figure it out on my own. So most of what I would do is just reading articles, whatever. I'll subscribe, like Golang is an interesting one because there's a lot of attention on that and a lot of the really interesting problems in the world right now are being solved in that language. And so I subscribe to like a Golang blog, and essentially every week they put out a ton of articles of people that are just like very, very different use cases of things that they're making. And you know, you can read about what they did and actually look at the code. Everyone obviously links to GitHub on everything now. And so that's kind of how I'm keeping up on that right now.
Like as a developer, I mean, obviously right now your full focus is on your company, but let's say you were to want to build something new, like where will you get inspiration to build like a new app or like to get an idea, like how will you go about that?
Yeah, for me, being completely engrossed in what Cake does and like our specific use case, there's no shortage of ideas of things that we'd like to do within that realm. So I think you kind of just have to find your niche and what you're interested in, and then just stick in it and get really, really deep, get as smart as you possibly can, become one of the top 100 people in the world that knows about that thing, and the ideas are easy at that point. That's what I would recommend.
If you're working on a problem, it's just not working. You've tried rack and brain.
Yeah.
What's your go-to resource for getting help to figure that out?
The answer to that is that happens to my employees all the time, and I'm the go-to resource. And I would say what I would always tell everyone in that situation is you're not logging enough, right? You clearly don't know what's actually happening in the program. Like either you're trying to do something that you haven't done before and you just don't know how to go about it. That doesn't really happen when you've been doing this as long as I have. Like you kind of know where to start at a certain point. But if your program's not doing what you think it should be doing, and you can't figure out what it's doing, you're just not logging it well enough, and you don't have enough visibility into what's actually happening. And it becomes very hard when you start getting into like multi-threading and like 10 things happening at once. It becomes difficult to debug programs like that. Being able to follow trace what's actually happening is no small feat. So spending as much time as you can on things like unit testing, logging, and like automated load testing and things is stuff that we worry about. Those end up paying you back in spades much later, because you might waste 4 days trying to figure something out that would have never happened, or you would have immediately known about if you had done some of that upfront work. Sometimes you feel like that's a luxury and you don't want to, like, unit testing that topic, right? Sometimes it feels like a luxury and I don't have time to do it right now, right? And to be honest, I'm not crazy on needing 100% code coverage, because I don't believe that that's even possible. And I think the people that try to do it are solving a problem that doesn't exist in a lot of ways. But I think that it's more about understanding what the program's supposed to do, not how it's doing it, and really testing those things, right? I know that this is what it's supposed to do, and I'm gonna go in and put things in place to where I know that that's always gonna work. Right? And if it doesn't, I know how to figure that out quickly.
What do you mean by code coverage?
Code coverage just essentially means that, like, every line of code is being executed as part of a unit test. And again, the problem with that is, great, that line of code's executed, but how? Right? It's not about that line is executed, it's about all the different ways it could be used, right? And so if you don't think about how the thing's actually going to be used, you're still missing something big.
So when you're looking at a candidate's like portfolio, like their projects that they have, like hobby projects, what do you look for specifically to show that, one, they're passionate, and two, they know what they're talking about?
One, something relevant technology-wise, right? I don't want to look at something that was made in some programming language that no one's used in 20 years, well, which is kind of obvious. Two, I want it to be clear that it's something that actually interests you and doesn't check a box, right? It needs to be, I really wanted to figure this out and make this, both in two ways, both on the, because I'm really invested in solving this specific problem or exposing this specific data or whatever it is that project is. Like, I'm really interested in making that work and function, because I think that's interesting. And two, that you didn't cut any corners when you actually made it. If I'm gonna look at code and you're just giving me a project, I'm gonna go look at code, like, you better feel pretty confident in that code, and not from both a formatting standpoint, from a variable name visibility, from a consistency standpoint, and how it's made, following conventions wherever you possibly can. Because if that's like, you're putting yourself on display and I'm just looking at this project, like, that better be a representation of you and how you want to be perceived, because if it isn't, I've got nothing to go on.
And how important is the code versus like the front end or the UI?
If you're coming in as someone junior, I'm not expecting the code to be, at some senior level. And the UI is not important at all. Well, I wouldn't say at all. I think that there's enough templates and like CSS kind of starter packs that you can get in place to where, like, it's not hard to make something that looks decent. I'm not looking for something that's like game changing, some crazy UI, but like, if you make something that looks like a website made in 1995, like, you didn't start with the right thing, because it's really easy to avoid that nowadays.
Where the name Cake come from?
That's a great question. So it's really just ended up being a play off of like trying to make software that had previously been very difficult to use easier. So, hey, it's a piece of cake, or it's a cakewalk. And to be honest, over time, we ended up, you build something for 8 years, it ends up being complex, right? And so we've done our best to try to keep it easy to use, but you end up building so much that becomes a really hard thing to actually accomplish. And so that's a little ironic, I guess. But yeah, that was where it originally started.
It's a layer cake.
Yeah, no shortage of jokes. We actually have had people come into our office thinking we were a bakery before.
Were they disappointed, or were they happy about it?
Yeah, it was when our office was originally on PCH, and yeah, someone just walked in. That's pretty good.
Any other questions? All right, Dave, well, I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks, guys.
So he's also gonna be hiring, he always hires, you know, pretty much across all skill levels, so looking at entry level, boot camp graduates, so definitely someone good to know, alright?
Thank you.